Mike Bennett and Impact Wrestling. I want to talk about what's next for Mike Bennett when it comes to his career, where he's going to sign with next. Obviously, after his release from WWE, he recently had done a few appearances or done one appearance for the NWA, competed for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship at the Primetime Live pay-per-view debut. He was unsuccessful. We haven't had any further confirmation as to what his plans are next in his career, where he's going to sign next. He's one of the last names that was released by WWE that hasn't yet signed anywhere. I think he's up there with the likes of Eric Rowan, and that from that group of people that were released by WWE back in April, that people are eagerly anticipating, okay, where are you going to go next? Where are you going to sign next? So obviously, this is an Impact Wrestling video, so I'm going to try and break down why I think he should sign with Impact Wrestling. I think right now Impact Wrestling is the best destination for Mike Bennett. I think that's the best place for him and Maria to go. Why? Mostly because of his history. I think his history with the company means that he's perfect to return to the company. He absolutely is perfect to return to the company. And because there are so many people currently in Impact Wrestling right now under contract of Impact Wrestling that Mike Bennett has previously feuded with during his previous time with the company. Now, Mike Bennett obviously was with Impact Wrestling for only a year. It's incredible to think that his run in Impact Wrestling lasted from 2016 to 2017, and he got so much accomplished during those 12 months. It might have been slightly longer than that, but it was a really impactful, pardon the pun there, 12 months for Mike Bennett during his time with Impact Wrestling. Now, during his time with Impact Wrestling, he had a feud with EC3, Ethan Carter III, and this led to a Slammiversary match between the two, in which Mike Bennett was defeated by EC3. And then after his feud with EC3, so just keep in mind that EC3 is currently still with Impact Wrestling, or has returned to Impact Wrestling after being released by WWE at the same time as Mike Bennett, by the way. After feuding with EC3 in Impact Wrestling, which actually led to a Slammiversary match, then Mike Bennett went on to feud with Eddie Edwards over the TNA X Division Championship. Mike Bennett actually defeated Eddie Edwards for the TNA X Division Championship at the time. And then this led to a match for the TNA X Division Championship in an Ultimate X match, in which Eddie Edwards defeated Mike Bennett to become the X Division champion there. So that's another feud. So you've got two people there. You've got EC3 and you've got Eddie Edwards that Mike Bennett has history with in Impact Wrestling. But it continues. So also, Mike Bennett, of course, has history with Moose. It was actually Mike Bennett who was the person who essentially, well, in storyline, brought Moose in to Impact Wrestling. Because, of course, at Destination X in 2016, Mike Bennett interrupted the main event between Eddie Edwards and Bobby Lashley with the help of the debuting Moose. So he has that connection there with Moose. And for a brief period of time, Moose and Mike Bennett were connected. They were, I wouldn't say a team, but they were certainly associates. And therefore, it continued, and he had this relationship with Moose. And then eventually Moose broke away. He refused to help Mike Bennett during an episode of Impact Wrestling, and after the match, Mike Bennett would then yell at Moose, calling him a failed football player, and then Moose would attack him. So he's got history with three people that are under contract of Impact Wrestling right now in Impact Wrestling. He's got history of EC3, he's got history of Eddie Edwards, and he's also got history with Moose. So this actually led to a match at Bound for Glory in 2016, whereby Mike Bennett was defeated by Moose. And then later on that night, that's when Mike Bennett went on to have his feud with Cody and Brandy Rhodes. So there is certainly a lot of history with Mike Bennett during his 12 months in Impact Wrestling, and certainly a lot of opponents that he could face upon his return to the company should he re-sign with them. As I mentioned, he previously had feuds with Moose, he had feuds with Eddie Edwards over the TNA X Division Championship, and there's a lot of history there that Impact Wrestling has footage of. So they can do these feuds as a way to reintroduce Mike Bennett back to Impact Wrestling, and they can play up the past. They can use the tape library that they have to play up these feuds. And as I mentioned, he also has a history of EC3 in Impact Wrestling too. So if he does come in, he can feud with Eddie Edwards, Moose, or EC3. And it's funny, when you rattle those names off, you mention Moose and you mention EC3, which two guys just happen to be facing each other at Bound for Glory? That would be Moose versus EC3 in an undisclosed location. Looks like it's going to be a cinematic style. That's right, Moose and EC3, both guys who have had feuds with Mike Bennett in Impact Wrestling in the past. What a perfect way. What a perfect way to reintroduce Mike Bennett to Impact Wrestling than to get involved in a match between two of his former rivals. The pieces are there. The pieces are absolutely there. And I mentioned about his feud with Eddie Edwards during his time in Impact Wrestling. That was over the X Division Championship. Now, you have to wonder what Eddie Edwards is going to do coming out of Bound for Glory. We know that at Bound for Glory, Eddie Edwards is going to face Ken Shamrock, and Ken Shamrock is going to have Sami Callihan in his corner. But is that feud going to continue after Bound for Glory? We don't know. We know that Sami Callihan's contract is close to expiring with Impact Wrestling. I don't know the details of that. How long is Ken Shamrock going to stay around in Impact Wrestling? We don't know. So maybe after Eddie Edwards is finished with Ken Shamrock, or, well, regardless of how that goes down, maybe he transitions into a feud against the returning Mike Bennett. That could be something to do there. And that would be a fun way to reintroduce Mike Bennett back to Impact Wrestling by going after the heart and soul of Impact Wrestling, that they call anyway, in Eddie Edwards. Mike Bennett also, I mentioned about his feud with Eddie Edwards there, is a former X Division champion. So if Mike Bennett does return, where does he enter? Does he go into the main event scene, or could he challenge once again for the X Division Championship? I would say that's probably unlikely. I think if you look at the participants in that X Division Championship scene right now, it's Rohit Raju, of course, is the X Division champion. You've got Willie Mack. Jordan Grace looks to be involved in there now as well. Whether how that's going to play out, we don't know. But I don't think Mike Bennett, if he does return, will be involved in there. No disservice to the X Division, but I think at this point Mike Bennett's probably too big of a star, I would say, to be involved in the X Division if he comes in. I think if Mike Bennett does return to the company, he's main event status. That's just my opinion. But there's more than potential to have Mike Bennett return to the company. There's absolutely more than potential for Mike Bennett and Maria, of course, to return to the company where they were previously. Now, what has Mike Bennett been doing since his release from WWE? Well, of course, he made an appearance on Talking Shopomania. Of course, Talking Shopomania 2 is scheduled for, I believe, is it November or the end of October? But there is a second one coming soon to Fight TV. Of course, Talking Shopomania was run by the Good Brothers, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, who are also signed to Impact Wrestling right now. So that's another connection for Mike Bennett to return to Impact Wrestling should he desire to. So he did an appearance on there, and he didn't actually compete. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek. It made reference and fun of his previous addiction to pain pills. He was at Talking Shopomania as a dealer to the wrestlers there. And also Maria Kanellis made an appearance on that as well, a brief cameo. Of course, Carl Anderson, back in the New Japan days, had his infatuation with Maria Kanellis. That was when, of course, Mike Bennett was working in Japan too. So he made an appearance on Talking Shopomania. And of course, on September 15th, 2020, he faced Nick Aldis for the NWA World Heavyweights Championship on the United Wrestling Network's Primetime Live pay-per-view debut. Of course, he lost that match. Now, I wasn't surprised in the slightest to see that Mike Bennett was working with the National Wrestling Alliance. He's very close friends with Billy Corgan. Once again, talk about ties to Impact Wrestling. That goes back to Billy Corgan's time as the president of Impact Wrestling. And it's been said quite a few times, and it's been reported quite a few times, that obviously Bennett left Impact Wrestling. He decided not to renew his contract back in 2017 and then moved to WWE. But it's been said multiple times that if Billy Corgan had won that whole power struggle and had indeed become the owner and president of Impact Wrestling and was running that company, Mike Bennett has, I think, openly said, as in addition to a variety of other wrestlers, that he would still be with Impact Wrestling today. I think even the Hardys at one point said that if Billy Corgan had won that whole deal, that they would still be with the company. And Mike Bennett also said the same. So I wasn't surprised in the slightest to see that Mike Bennett was working with the NWA at all. Absolutely not. So perhaps Mike Bennett is going to be involved with the NWA going forward. Perhaps he signed something with the NWA. We just don't know at the moment. We'll have to wait and see. No further dates as of yet for Mike Bennett have been announced. I would assume that he probably will be at Talking Shopomania 2. No further NWA dates have been announced for Mike Bennett. But one thing you do have to consider when you talk about the NWA is that the World's Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis has stated recently that NWA Power, which is NWA's weekly television series, will be returning to the YouTube channel. Now, We don't have an official date as to when NWA Power is going to be returning. We don't know how soon or when NWA Power is going to be returning. I would assume it's still at the same studio in Atlanta, Georgia, but I think it would obviously be an empty studio. But with Nick Aldis saying that NWA Power is going to return, that says to me that there are plans and discussions for the program to return. So perhaps Mike Bennett is involved in that and involved with the NWA in general. We'll just have to wait and see. Personally, as I mentioned, I would love to see Mike Bennett return to Impact. I think there's just so many stories that he could tell there. I really do. I think there's a ton of stories that Mike Bennett could tell, whether it's with past foes, as I mentioned, like EC3, like Moose, like Eddie Edwards, or with new superstars, or even superstars, again, that he does have a history with in the Good Brothers, obviously going back to Japan, but even new stars that maybe he hasn't faced previously, like a Ken Shamrock, like a Sami Callihan, someone like that. I think that could be really interesting. And what I will say about Mike Bennett after his WWE release is that if you haven't seen Mike Bennett recently, the guy is in absolutely the shape of his life. He is unbelievably jacked. I mean, to the nth degree, he is ginormous. He looks absolutely phenomenal. He's overcome addiction. He's overcome being at a low end, and he's absolutely ginormous right now. So if Impact Wrestling could do that deal that sees Mike and Maria Bennett return to Impact Wrestling, the Miracle return to Impact Wrestling, it would be a huge deal for me. I think it would be a massive get. I really do. Mike, at this point in his career, even after a WWE run which, quite frankly, diminished his star power and diminished his reputation in professional wrestling, he can still be an Impact World Champion for me. There is a redemption story there to tell, and I think Impact Wrestling would be the perfect place to do it. You have to remember Mike Bennett's reputation in the business before he went to WWE. He was one of the hottest and most valuable free agents. He really was. He was revered for his work that he did in Impact Wrestling. Previously, he'd been a tag team guy in Ring of Honor, but in Impact Wrestling was where he really stood out as a singles guy, and people really started to pay attention to what he was capable of, so much so that WWE signed him, put him straight on the main roster, didn't even bother sending him to NXT. That's how great that 12-month period was for Mike Bennett in Impact Wrestling. Now, obviously, his WWE run was just a mess for a variety of reasons. Creative. Mike himself said he didn't show up to WWE in the best shape of his life. Obviously, I mentioned the addiction there and a multitude of other issues going on during his time in WWE, but he's overcome them. He's overcome them, and he's rebuilding his reputation. He's rebuilding his status in the industry, and I think Impact Wrestling, as I mentioned, is the perfect place for Mike Bennett to come back and prove a lot of people wrong. And as I said, tell that redemption story. It's a perfect place. It's the perfect place to tell that redemption story. He really does have the potential to be an Impact World Champion for me. I absolutely think that's the case. He has the look. He has the ability on the mic. He's decent on the microphone. He has obviously Maria as his wife, as his manager or potentially his mouthpiece. People understate Maria Kanellis's ability on the mic. Her mic skills are very, very good. Her ability to cut a promo is very, very good. She cut some fantastic promos during her time with Impact Wrestling with Mike Bennett. She even cut some good promos with WWE during their time there as well. So people forget about that. People sleep on Maria sometimes in her ability to cut a promo. That whole package just works. It just works. So he has Maria as his mouthpiece, as his manager. And he also, of course, has the ability in the ring too. It's all there. It's all there for him to be a world champion. It's absolutely all there for him to be a world champion. And on top of that, he has history with the company. This is why I was so big on having Eric Young return to Impact Wrestling, because Impact Wrestling has all this footage of Mike Bennett. And it's the same with Eric Young, just on a larger scale. Obviously, they've got the majority of Eric Young's career on in their tape library and on demand. There's so much story that they can tell when it comes to Eric Young and his evolution throughout his career, and that's exactly what they've done since he's returned to the company. They've showed him be a comedic goof. They've shown him in World Elite. They've shown him in Team Canada. They've shown him as a knockout tag team champion. Whatever they've shown him him as TNA World Heavyweight Champion, but they've shown him evolve into the world-class maniac today. And that's been one of the really enjoyable elements of Eric Young's return to the company, on top of a multitude of other fantastic things that Eric Young has done since returning to the company. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, Mike Bennett was in Impact Wrestling for a short time, only a year, but he did a lot. in that year. He did a hell of a lot in that year, had some killer feuds against some fantastic wrestlers that are still signed to Impact Wrestling today. So that's why also I think it's so important that Mike Bennett returns to Impact, because there's so much story that they can tell by using his past. They can use that footage, they can use the tape library to their benefit there. And I think it's an ability and an opportunity to tell a fantastic story with multiple talents signed with the company. Now, obviously, there are other options out there for Mike Bennett right now. I mentioned the National Wrestling Alliance. Of course, in 2020, AEW is always an option for a free agent. He feuded with Cody and Brandy Rhodes before in Impact Wrestling, so Mike and Maria could certainly pick up that feud with Cody and Brandy in AEW if they want to. Again, I don't know if that's the best move for him, considering how saturated that roster is in AEW. I think it would be hard for him to stand out. Obviously, also another tie for him in AEW is that he was once partners with Matt Hardy in Ring of Honor as the Kingdom, so perhaps he could get involved with Matt Hardy in AEW there. It's potential. And of course, he could always go back to Ring of Honor. That's where he cut his teeth. It's where he really began to make his name. He's a former tag team champion with Matt Taven in the Kingdom, so he could certainly go back there, or he could also run some or work some shows for New Japan in their United States shows. He was a former IWGP tag team champion too. So there is options, obviously, for someone the potential and caliber of Mike Bennett, but personally, I would love to see him return to Impact Wrestling. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Mike Bennett's next move? Do you think he's going to continue with the NWA? Do you think he's going to go to Impact Wrestling, AEW, or maybe Ring of Honor? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy chatting about Impact with you guys. We will be doing an Impact Wrestling preview that will go up on the channel later today as well. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. Really just help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. I believe we're under 25 subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe as we inch ever closer to that magic 1,000 subscriber goal. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.